Hi, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Book Dawn, the show by the fans, for the fans. I'm Rakisha fans. We're fans of books. From the moment we were born and we could grab hold of things, the first things that we grabbed onto were books. Our tiny little fingers grabbed onto books. And for 40 years for me, for 30 years for Kaiser, we have not let go of those books. We love stories, we love books. This is a huge, huge, huge part of our lives. And we know that there's so many people like us out there who just love living in fiction, living in fantasy, living in thrill, living other people's stories because our own lives never really measure up to that thrill. Plus, it's an amazing escape. You can learn things, emotions, cultures, characters, so many things. So basically, we're so happy that today you guys are here with us live on all platforms. We're going live on Facebook, we're going live on YouTube, we're going live on X. So everywhere we're going live, and it's going to be for those people on X, it's going to be a complete English-based show, so you can understand everything we're talking about. Apologies to everybody in Bangladesh, but we have to talk in English. Why? Because in this very special show, we have the great Devon Eriksen, the author of Theft of Fire, with us. This dude is amazing. His book blew me away. I literally, when I read it, I was like, I feel like I've rediscovered Isaac Asimov all over again. It was like a big slap in my face. It was a wake up call. It really moved me. It was amazing. So this is one of those impossible things that we're doing, that Devon has agreed to appear on our little show to talk all about Theft of Fire. This is we're breaking the format of our show. We're not going to talk about any other books today. It's going to be all Devon Eriksen and all Theft of Fire, his philosophies, his work ethics, his inspirations, his some of his favorite books, etc., etc. We're going to talk about a lot of things. So without further ado, this is Devon Eriksen live here with us. Hi, Devon.
Hello.
Hi,
Well,
Devon.
hi. Thank you for having me on the show.
Now, thank you so much. This is, as I said, is one of those impossible things made
Yeah.
possible by science. And what better way to enjoy this moment than having one of the greatest sci-fi writers of this time with us on this show. So thank you so much,
Well,
Devon,
you're
for
too
making time.
kind. I mean, I've only
And
written one. I've only finished one book.
dude, if you never write another book again, this is one of those things. It's like there's this great American classic. Like there was this one book that one author wrote. I forgot the name. Is it Catcher in the Rye or something? Then he never wrote again for like 40 years. I'll be good with this book. This book was amazing. Like literally, like we're gonna get into all of that, Devon. But
Wow.
you have some strong opinions about the state of sci-fi, the state of
Oh yeah.
fiction. We're gonna get into all of that. First of all, again, welcome to the show from everyone in Bangladesh and everyone around the world. This really makes my year having you on this show. This is
Absolutely,
amazing.
absolutely.
Well, thank you. I hope I can live up to a billing like that.
And of course you will. So without further ado, let's look at the book cover. This is what we're going to talk about.
Hmm.
No, I'm not going to do any homework. Let's just dive right in. No homeworks, no other chit chat. Let's just dive in. So I don't. Sorry, one second. There we go. So this is the book we're talking about. This is Theft of Fire, the first book in the Orbital Space series. Most probably it's a trilogy, as far as I know. I might be wrong, but
Four
this
books
is
now.
four books. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So it's a series of four books. The first book is out. It came out, I think, last year,
Yes.
and it blew me away. It blew my co-host Kaiser Kabir away. I have another
Absolutely.
person who does this show with me. He's reading it at the point. It blew him away, and everybody I've talked to is blown them away. So, Devon, first questions first. Um, how did you come up with the idea of writing this story? What was your inspiration?
Ah. Well, the idea is maybe not. Novels are about usually about five or six ideas. A short story is one idea. Novels are about five or six, but usually there's one thing that you start with, and the other ideas kind of join the party as you write. So the first idea for me was actually a writing prompt on the internet. And usually when people make writing prompts, they're horrible because they always want to show off how clever they are. So they write, oh, there's this thing and this and this and this and this, and it gives no room for the author to be creative. But at one point, and I think it was on some kind of writers forum, I forget exactly where, there was this one very simple writing prompt. It says, "A princess kidnaps a pirate."
Mm.
And I,
Okay.
Mm.
oh,
Mm.
and I'm like, okay, let's set this in space.
Mm.
And it just kind of grew from there because the creative process snowballs like that. When you're a creative person, when you're an author, amateur or professional, you tend to see things in your life and you just kind of collect them. You just kind of make a mental note, like they're Legos, like you're picking Legos out of the environment. And then you've got this big tub of Legos. And pretty soon you start to see ways that they could fit together. So I said, okay, princess kidnaps a pirate. Okay, gonna have this in space. Um, so probably not a literal princess because that's a a kind of an archaic political system. So let's do sort of metaphorical. She's a corporate heiress. Okay, why is she kidnapping this guy? Well, she's probably not going to use physical force. She's probably going to blackmail him. Okay, what does she need to blackmail somebody for? Oh, she's got to go after something where she can't trust anybody that
Mm.
paid. Okay, what would that thing be? It's got to be fantastically valuable. It's got to be unique in a future society with lots of technology. So, what about technological information? How about we make it an alien artifact? And it just kind of snowballs from there.
Mm.
This is very interesting because I personally am working on a project right now, and and I came up with this idea of like, what if there was a young woman living with an older husband in the middle of nowhere, and she falls in love with this guy who doesn't exist. So literally, it was this
Uh,
one thought that came to my head, and then I started asking questions. Okay, why is she there? Why doesn't this guy exist? Can other people see him? What's the point of all of this? So I love the fact that it's a very, I don't know, is this a rational or scientific approach to creativity? I don't know what it is, but do you think this is the way you thought because your background is an engineer, or that's how you are in general?
well, creativity is not just it's not just a capability, it's a compulsion. So I think that people who are creative types or who feel that creative urge through their lives, they're always kind of they love stories. They gather little bits of stories. They see things in their own lives and they just kind of salt those away. And then at a certain point you start asking what if? And
Mm.
what if is the beginning of a lot of creativity, and usually that takes two forms. Usually it's like, let me let me take something familiar and put it in an unfamiliar place, a place where it usually isn't, and it does different things there. And what if? Or let me take a familiar thing and change just one thing about it that changes everything. And when you take enough things and you combine them in these new and unusual ways, you get something that is at the same time familiar enough so that people like to read it, but unfamiliar enough so they don't know it already. They haven't seen it already. It draws them in because they're curious. So I think there's just there's types of people who like to do this. There's types of people who love stories and they're hungry for stories and they ask themselves what if all the time. And if you're an engineer, then the kinds of Lego blocks you collect are engineering kind of Lego blocks, the things that an engineer
Mm.
sees and thinks about. But if, say, for example, you work in advertising, you might collect a very different set of pieces of a story, but the process of assembling them and that creative snowballing process might be very similar.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Um, Devon, my next question is I'm very happy that the book came out when it did because it came out at a time when technologically it's possible for me to have this chat with you right now. If you had brought this book out 20 years ago, you'd be so big you wouldn't have time for me. I'd never know how to reach out to you. So I'm happy the book came out when it did. Now, my question is, why wait so long to write your first book? I love the fact that you're doing it now, but
Uh-huh.
is what was the inciting incident that you know what I need to write this book now versus say 20 years ago or 30 years ago? So what was that inciting incident?
Why did I start writing when I'm the age I am and my beard is solid gray and this kind of thing? Why didn't I start sooner? Well, when I was a child, my father was one of the lead engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory on the Voyager spacecraft
Oh
project.
wow.
So he was in charge of the programming for the scan platform with all the cameras. So all those pictures of the outer planets, my father took those, um, and we had them hanging up around our house. So I was growing up with this idea: okay, we're going to go out there one day, and we're going to see all this stuff firsthand. And what is that going to be like? What if?
Mm.
what what is life going to be like in space? So I thought about that, and at the same time I was devouring all of the classic science fiction I could lay my hands on. And I did say to myself very early that I wanted to be a science fiction writer. And unfortunately, I didn't just say it to myself. I said it to adults around me. And when somebody is 12 and they're saying this, adults tend to not take you very seriously. So they
Right.
say things like, "Oh, honey, that's a stupid dream. You can't make any money at that. You should become a doctor or a lawyer." And, I tried writing, but the thing about writing is that there are no literary prodigies. The process of creating a believable character really kind of comes from the experience of having bounced off on other people for at least a certain amount of time. So teenagers write like teenagers. And
Mm.
some teenagers can write very engagingly, but they write very engagingly in a sort of a teenage fashion. So I looked at the stuff I was writing and I was like, "Mm, this is not good." It's it has some interesting bits, but it's not really a coherent story. I'm just kind of imitating William Gibson. And
Mm.
and so I kept up with it here and there, kind of dabbled, but I went and I became an engineer. Well, I had some misspent youth first, but when I was about 30ish years old, I went to college and became an engineer, and I spent about 20 years doing engineering. And when I retired from that, I'm like, okay, I'm retired now. Software engineering has been good to me. I can do what I want. I don't have to worry too much about paying the bills because I'm retired. That's kind of taken care of. This doesn't have to be successful. This
Mm.
doesn't have to go anywhere. My definition of success is that some people read it and love it. And obviously, I'd like to sell millions and millions of copies and become outrageously wealthy and buy a small Caribbean island. But the real reason I'd like to sell millions and millions of copies is so that millions and millions of people can read and enjoy what I create. And so it's sort of being in this position of having nothing to lose. I sat down and I watched a whole and read a whole bunch of stuff by professional authors about their writing process, and I decided that 95% of it was stupid, or 95% of it was at least didn't work for me. But 5% of it did. And I kind of held on to that. And I found that I was able to put it together. And a story was starting to emerge. And so I just 9 months later, I had a manuscript. Like, what the hell do I do with this? Do I find an agent? Well, it turns out that the publishing industry in the United States is a little bit blighted because we are going through a period of political and ideological conflict right now. And the publishing industry has sort of been taken possession of by one side of that political and ideological conflict. And I sort of represent the demographic that's not favored by that side. So I said, okay, these people don't want to publish guys who look like me, talk like me, write like the things that I write. So fine, I'll do it myself. So we figured out, the three of us in my family in our little home in East Nowhere, Tennessee, how to be a publisher. And we did, we hired editors, we hired cover artists, we did layout, we figured out ISBNs, we did all the things. And there are a lot of little things that come between manuscript and here's my Amazon page where you can order it. And, how do you get beta readers for an author
Mm.
nobody's ever heard of? And that was fun. But eventually you keep working, you solve one problem, and then you solve another, and then you solve another. And eventually, if you solve enough problems, you get to see yourself on that order page and you get to see the orders and the reviews start to roll in. And suddenly, without really feeling any different, without knowing what the hell has just happened to you, you're a professional and people take you seriously and you're a little bit surprised by that.
I think this is a perfect time to talk about the fact that your book is obviously available in Amazon. Unfortunately, Amazon is not Kindle is not accessible from Bangladesh because we
Oh,
don't have a lot of sales of the Kindle device.
I did not know that.
But but our population, we have a huge population, and 60% of the population is young, and mobile phone penetration, smart mobile phone penetration is, I think, 60% of the population. So that's a huge population who can read Kindle books on their phone. So I personally am doing this Kindle campaign where I'm tagging Amazon and tagging KDP and telling them you guys should switch on the Bangladesh market. But for Bangladeshi readers, you guys can get Devon Eriksen's book very easily just from his website, which is in the link
Yep.
below. But this is the website, which is www.devonerickson.com. Just go there and buy it. It's $8 or something, very cheap. Just get this book because trust me, it's going to be one of the greatest books you've read. If you're a sci-fi
Absolutely.
fan, absolutely, it's going to be one of the greatest books you've read. And once again, this is the fantastic book cover. Love this book cover. Before we go into anything else, Devon, you mentioned one of the steps is choosing the book cover, etc. So
Yes.
I just want to talk about this cover. What I found interesting, I have dipped recently into the indie circle, thanks to, again, I need to shout out somebody. 1 second, please. I'm producing the show myself, so I need to move around a little. 1 second. There we go. So I need to give a shout out to this dude. Um, where is he? JCM Byrne. I discovered his book on Amazon Kindle and I bought it. He has this amazing series called, which starts with Wistful Ascending. He's written 6 books already. Love his books. It's like a superhero, retired superhero in a space station. So I got into the entire indie book thing with his books. So shout out to JCM Byrne. Thank you so much for watching. Um, and I noticed something. I noticed that a lot of books, as we have seen from your cover,
Yes.
they look like movie posters, as in you have these big faces or big figures.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
was that a conscious decision that, you know what, my book will have these three huge human beings and not a lot of context. For example, if we look at, this is another book. This is The Lost Fleet by Jack Campbell. It's a fantastic series. Then if we go to Ender's Game, we all know Ender's Game. So I don't know exactly what's going on here, but there's a huge spaceship, there's a little fighter, and some sort of a futuristic runway. Versus, the book that you had, which is very much poster-like. So,
Yeah.
is there any? What was the thought behind the kind of book cover that you created for your
Ah.
for your
Well,
book?
The considerations that go into book cover design, in my mind, they kind of work like this. So every book starts with a series of promises that you're making to the reader. You read the first page, you read the first chapter, and you have some notion, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know what kinds of things this book is going to be about. And those are the promises that draw you in if they are well made and if the author understands what he's doing. So the thing about a book, especially a book by a new author, is that you want to know something about that book before you pick it up. So this process of promises starts before the book. It starts in the back cover text. It starts in the cover. It starts with how you publicize and how you market the book and how you talk about it. All of these things, you're creating these little promises for what kind of experience the reader is going to have. So what's important about a book cover is that it's nice if it's pretty. It's good if it draws the eye. But what it really has to do is, on some subtle level, it has to signal what the experience of reading this book is going to be like. What is this book about? And some of it books will do that by resembling other book covers in their
Mm.
genre. Like that Ender's Game cover you showed me is, I would say maybe perhaps not the best design, but of course,
Mm.
it's Orson Scott Card. All he has to do is write Orson Scott Card on the cover.
Mm.
People will trust him that it's going to be good. But you're signaling, okay, this is science fiction. There are ships in space, but it doesn't tell you a lot beyond that. So when I made the cover for Theft of Fire, when I worked out that design with my cover artist, I says to myself, okay, this book is character driven. Yes, we are in a science fictional setting, but as one reader said, this would have worked as a road trip from Los
Yep.
Angeles to New York with three
Yep.
people in a car. And so I wanted to let people know that a lot of this plot was going to be driven by the interaction between these three characters. And I wanted to set up a cover that, okay, this is going to tell you kind of a little bit about who these three characters are, but in a way that doesn't give you the whole story. It makes you curious. So you look at these people and you say, okay, what's going on with his eye? Why does that girl on the left appear to be a hologram? And the girl in the center, she's got these huge cartoon anime eyes, but that's not an art style thing because the other two look more normal. What's going on here?
Mm.
And that kind of sets the stage for these three very different characters, one of whom is human and cybernetically enhanced, one is sort of genetically tampered and post-human, and one is an artificial intelligence. So it kind of teases who these people are and what the interactions are, and then we bring in a few science fictional elements to make sure that the reader understands that this is a science fiction novel. So that kind of signaling what the book is about is much more important than depiction of anything literal from the book. I mean, if you look at the original Star Wars movie poster, you see, the figures of the protagonists in the foreground, and Lucas standing like this with a lightsaber, which he never does in the movie. And, you see the big sort of profile of Darth Vader's helmet in the back. And none of this is a depiction of anything literal from the movie. but it has this composite quality of telling you a lot of little details about what the experience of the film is like. So I wanted to do the same sort of thing, calibrated to, okay, this is what you're getting into with Theft of Fire.
So I finished the book last night at 3 a.m. So
Uh-huh.
the whole book is still fresh on my mind,
Uh,
and I absolutely loved it. But like you said, a very interesting point that this plot could have been in any genre. The princess could have been a princess in the ancient times.
yes.
Marcus could have been a pirate, and the holographic character could have been a fairy-like
Yes.
supernatural creature, and they could have been out there chasing an ancient magical artifact.
Yes.
But I saw that you dedicated Theft of Fire to Brandon Sanderson,
Yes.
who is mainly famous for his fantasy books, fantasy
Yes.
genre. So, Curious Mind wants to know, even though this plot could have been on a fantasy setting, and since you're a huge fan of fantasy, is there any particular reason why you chose sci-fi over fantasy?
Well, I think there's not maybe as much difference as most people think.
Okay.
See, this may be slightly controversial, but I believe that science fiction is a subgenre of fantasy,
Hmm.
that science fiction novels are fantasy novels. And to make sense of this, I'll tell you what I mean by fantasy. Fantasy is any story where the setting is so different from the reader's daily experience that you have to make a sustained effort throughout the story to explain the setting to the reader. So, obviously, science fiction fits into this.
Hmm.
And I think this explains why so many people who love science fiction also love fantasy and vice versa.
Yeah.
Why the two fandoms are almost the same.
Hmm.
Because the common experience is that you're being taken to a world that is not your own and you have to figure it out. And that's why I read both. That's why I love both. That's why I consider them almost interchangeable. I mean, is Star Wars science fiction or fantasy? You know,
Exactly.
it's in
Yeah.
space, but you've got
Hmm.
wizards with swords.
Right.
Um, so, the line can definitely blur. But what the readers of both really, what they're really into is, I want to be taken to a different world and I
Hmm.
want to have to figure out what it is. So, Theft of Fire is the hardest of hard science fiction. The physics works, the orbital trajectories work. I've had asteroid scientists check my math and give it the
Oh,
thumbs
wow.
up. Yeah, yeah. I had one 5-star review from a lady on Amazon who
Wow.
said she was an asteroid scientist, and I said, "Oh yeah, right, sure." And then I put her name in a search engine, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, here's some papers. Oh, here's an asteroid named after her. Okay, I'll take that." But Theft of Fire is the hardest of hard science fiction.
Yep.
But when I'm finished with this 4-book series, I could easily switch over and do some fantasy stuff where everything
Hmm.
is driven by the rule of cool and I don't have to do as much math. And that would be fun too.
But I
I think,
observed. Uh,
Kaisa, that's a fantastic question. Huh, continue, continue.
so starting from page one to the last page, the main characters never exit the spaceship. Like everything, the whole story of Theft of Fire happens in
They
the
do
spaceship.
twice.
They do?
Yes, twice.
You mean
There's,
when they
there's
explore?
two incidents where a character goes outside the spaceship.
I mean, in or around the spaceship.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, so was that intentional that it was going to be a single location plot? Like was
Mm.
there a conscious choice?
Well, it wasn't really a conscious choice to make it a single location, but I
Hmm.
decided, you know, this is my first novel.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult. It's going to
Mm.
be difficult to figure all this stuff out. So, one of the other things I'd like to do is I like to cook, and one of the things I've learned from cooking is that it's better to do a simple thing well than to try to
Mm-hmm.
take on too much. So I said,
Right.
I'm going to have a tight location. I'm going to have 3 characters and almost no one else.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few secondary characters that show up here and there, but if I stick to these 3 characters, I can really go deep into what makes them tick and make them really realistic and believable and relatable and make people care about them. So, if I were to make an analogy, Theft of Fire is like a creme brulee. It's
Yep.
a very simple recipe, and you work really hard to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that I really loved about Theft of Fire is that it's very economically written. I love
Yep.
the single location because you made it work with the characters. And
Yep.
I know your background is in engineering and your
Yes.
father was somebody who worked on space stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I really appreciated the fact that you kept the techno babble to a minimum. My favorite genre is sci-fi, but I've read far more fantasy novels than I've read sci-fi because, and you have some strong opinions about the state of sci-fi, I know, and I want to
Uh-huh. Yeah, oh,
hear
yeah.
about that. So the reason I was thinking is that one of the first things that intrigued me about your book was because you said that sci-fi has lost hope, and I would like to add another word to hope. I don't know if you mentioned it or not. I feel like
Uh-huh.
the sci-fi that's been going on for the last 30 years, they've lost hope and they've lost joy. When I read when I read original Asimov novels, the Robot series, the Foundation series, especially the Foundation trilogy, not the later ones, there's this very simple storytelling. For example, you learn about the fall of the empire and the rise of Foundation through thriller stories, murder mysteries. You learn about the death of the empire in the caves of steel and Elijah Bailey stories through murder mysteries. So the setup is a murder mystery. It's a thriller, very simple setups versus the kind of stuff that I've been trying to read for the last 20 years and have not been able to finish those books, and I just kind of gave up on it is because there's a lot of technobabble, a lot of scientific, I don't know, detailed descriptions of things I don't really care
Uh-huh.
about,
Yeah.
and very little character work. And the characters, even if there's a lot of character work, I don't find it satisfying. So I really love the fact that this is a very contained story where through this simple mechanism of 3 people involved in a heist against their will, nobody wants to be with the other people. So even against their will, they're on this journey together. And one thing that I've talked about incessantly when I first reviewed your book on this show, and I told Kaiser and I told my other friends, like I have never seen in a sci-fi book the way you have handled the class difference, somebody who's
Yeah.
the daughter of SpaceX and somebody who's the average Joe, he's a middle class, either blue collar or white collar, the average Joe, and the way they interact with each other in an adverse situation completely reflects their backgrounds. So they each have their backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, family backgrounds, and you brought it out so nicely in their adversarial discussions and arguments and fights. That was something I absolutely loved. So, is that something, again, I don't know how to put this as a question. I'm not very good at interviewing people. Was that
Yes, you are.
something it was a plan, or was it something that grew out of your writing? Because I found that insanely amazing that the way you portrayed the class differences, I have not read that so beautifully portrayed in any book that I've read in the last 20 years.
Well, thank you. But this kind of approach to characterization and characters' opinions grew out of something that really, really, really annoys me about a lot of modern science fiction and wherever it occurs in a book is that authors are creative people and we have strong opinions. Anyone who's read my Twitter feed knows I have strong
Yes.
opinions. Um, but I despise this thing where you have the book as an author soapbox and you have the character as a sock puppet where the author's hand is up the character's ass, moving his mouth and making him say things that the author wants to say. And essentially, what you're doing is you're lecturing the reader.
Mm.
And the reason that that is so obnoxious is that when we read a story, we want a story. We want to forget, to suspend disbelief, to be in this universe just a little bit and forget as much as possible that we're reading a story and it's all made up. We don't want to remember that. We don't want to remember that none of this is real. And if the author gets on board, if the author jumps out of the woodwork and starts talking, then you are reminded that there is an author
Mm,
and that the author wants you to think this. And all of this is made up so that it will make the author's opinions sound more reasonable. It's it's a bait and switch. You were promised a story and you got a lecture. That's not fun. I don't like that. So when I approach these characters, it's like, okay, these characters are going to get on their soapbox, but they're going to get on their soapbox about their opinion, not
mm,
mine.
mm,
And I will never, I make this promise to myself, I will never put in any named character in any of my books who's just there to be wrong, just there to be stupid, just there to be evil, just there to be a straw man that disagrees with the author's opinion and I can make him fall from a great height onto spinning
mm,
helicopter blades.
mm,
I despise that kind of writing. So when Marcus and Miranda argue about the different way they see economics, about the different way they see class, neither of them are arguing Devon Eriksen's opinion. Marcus is arguing Marcus's opinion. Miranda is arguing Miranda's opinion. And I've had people who are so beaten down by these lecture books that they're almost flinching as if they're expecting the blow. And they say to me well, you're such a pro technology, pro space exploration, right wing libertarian type, you know, what do you have against Elon Musk and SpaceX? I look at them, excuse me? Excuse me, what? What do I have what against what now? And it's Marcus is, yes, Marcus doesn't like Elon Musk and SpaceX. I'm not Marcus. See, no
mm,
cybernetic eye. I don't fly around in space. I'm not a belter. This is a character's opinion, not the author's opinion. There's a difference. And I try to write always keeping that difference in mind. So every character is that anyone ever writes is bits and pieces of ourselves mixed up with bits and pieces of other people. But you never want to cross the line into lecturing rather than depicting and drawing a story and entertaining.
Got it. Kaiser, do you have any fantastic question? I think all your questions are better than mine.
Yes, yes. I want to get a little bit into the book without giving any spoilers to anyone. So I really like how you created this sort of a belter lingo. Like I learned
Mhm.
two new words from the book. Like every time he says "stet," I was like, "What's that word?" I know what it means. It means "Do you understand?" or "Understood."
Yeah.
But "stet" is like it was. I think it was an amazing creation, and it was really rewarding when some of the other characters adopt saying that lingo as well as the story progresses.
Uh-huh.
And I think you use another lingo that I think it's pronounced as kano,
Okay,
k
no.
k a
Yeah.
y a n o. So
Yeah.
are these real words that exist in some, or did you just invent them as
Que
as
no
belter
is
lingo?
actually from Spanish. It's
Okay.
a I projected how it would be mispronounced in the future when it left the Spanish language,
Wow. Okay.
but que no is literally like what no. And it's something that Spanish speakers will stick on the end to
Mm-hmm.
say, right?
Mm.
And that has a little bit made it into the belter lingo in the 22nd century. Stet I just made up,
Mm.
but it kind of has this I think there's something subconscious that I did
Yep.
in the roots there that kind of connects it to what it
Yep.
means. And there's a couple of other bits and pieces of belter lingo
Mm-hmm.
here and there. And one of the things that I tried to do is that I often find that fiction writers, they make their language too neat. They
Mm-hmm.
rigidly define everything, and that's not how language works between people.
Mm-hmm.
Language is evolving.
Yep.
So there's this context of different groups of people, like belters and who live and work in low gravity, and flatlanders who live on planets, and orbitals who are the people who live off Earth. And it's like, okay, does Dorji Tsangmo, this Tibetan guy who lives and works on a space station, is he a belter or a flatlander? Well, and what is the distinction between orbitals and belters? Because all belters are orbitals and not all orbitals are belters. And it's this sort of sense of a language in flux as these groups define themselves, because these are the political and ethnic groups of the 22nd century. It doesn't necessarily make as much sense to talk about an American or a Bangladeshi or a German in the 22nd century, because Earth has a much more unified government, and some people approve of that and some people don't. So there's a lot more sort of spreading cultural homogeneity on Earth. But in this new frontier, these new distinctions have started to emerge. So in the very beginning of the book, I sort of promised this. I tease it a little bit by saying that Miranda has a bit of a Martian accent in there
Mm.
somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, what is a Martian accent? Well, it's it's not anything yet, but
Mm-hmm.
by the 22nd century there might be such a thing as a Martian accent.
How would you
Nice.
yourself characterize the Martian accent? Like what does it sound like to you?
Well, I didn't have any idea.
Okay.
I just like, okay, she has a bit of an accent, and fortunately somebody else was able to help me out with this.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Theft of Fire audiobook coming,
Oh, right, right.
and it is a partially a full cast audiobook where I have different actors for the three major characters,
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
and I directed it all myself. We had a lot of
Wow.
fun. So I had to search so hard to find the right voice actress for Miranda.
Mm.
And her name is Emma Ray. She's very talented. She's done mostly video game stuff, a little bit of anime here and there, but she is very, very underappreciated as an actress. I think she's going to be a real star one day. Um, and she sent me this audition where she had this beautiful, just raw interpretation of who Miranda was. And of course, for those of you who haven't read the book, Miranda is a midget.
Mm.
She's 3 feet 9 inches tall. And so Emma Ray managed to do this voice where she makes the character sound tiny, but not like a child. and then she throws just a little bit of the Martian of an exotic accent in there, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's it. That's the Martian accent. So that actually kind of exists, but it was not invented by me.
Okay. Now I have to listen to the audiobook.
Yeah.
That will come out soon. We are in the final stages of audio engineering.
but I saw,
Fantastic.
I think there is a sample in your website.
Oh yes,
So,
yes, you can hear
so
her now.
right, exactly. So all throughout the book, I did not find a single space where I got bored or whatnot. So it was a quick read for me. But there is this one particular chapter that really stood out for me. I think that was really beautiful and poetic. I think when you wrote that chapter, I had this vision that I think you were in a very peaceful and serene mode. But I don't know like it's a beautiful chapter.
Mhm.
I think you know which one I'm talking about. It's chapter 33, The Edge of Sunlight, the first half,
Ah,
where you describe how the white
uh-huh,
cat is just floating in space.
uh-huh.
So I think this book stands out from all the other part of the rest of Theft of Fire. So I just
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, what was going on in your mind while you were writing that particular chapter, or did you
Uh-huh.
insert that later on? But it was
How
so
did I
beautifully and
how
poetically
did I
written.
think about that? Well, we've reached the ending state of the book,
Yeah.
and I don't want to explicitly sort of say what that is because
Hmm.
there for people listening who maybe haven't read it, and I don't want to spoil their enjoyment. But we've reached this set of ending conditions. And what I wanted to do was pull back, like you're making a movie and you pull the camera way back to see the landscape, see the distant hills, and then pull the camera back further past the clouds and see the surface of the earth. And what I wanted to do was really, now that we have this impression of what has happened with and for the characters. The next question is, what are the broader implications for the solar system? And what I do with pulling back like that was I wanted to create a picture of how vast the solar system is and how little of it even the humans of the 22nd century actually occupy, and how big this space is.
Mm.
And so just how isolated things can be. And so I painted this picture of sort of this long, slow time scale of the dark outer reaches of the solar system, sort of contrasting that to where the humans live and where they've been and where they've colonized. And that sort of sets the stage for the second scene of that chapter, which is going to, within the context of that setting,
Yep.
and I'm having to deliberately be vague here, set up, okay, what are the promises for the second book?
Yep.
What is the second book going to be about? Because the last scene of that last chapter is, okay, this is where we're going next.
Mm.
This is the next set of promises. This is what to expect from the sequel.
No, it's a fantastic place where you left us, but I want to take you a little bit back. I
Mhm.
want to take you to one of the sequences where I was literally scared, and I've read a lot of horror books. I have done a PhD on Stephen King and whatnot,
Aha.
but this was the first time that I can remember when I was reading something and I was genuinely scared that where are you taking these two characters? I'm talking
Yep.
about a particular nasty fight
Yep.
between Miranda and I think Warner. What's his name?
Marcus Warnock, yeah.
Marcus Warner. Marcus and Miranda. This is
The
nasty, nasty fight. I
airlock
think it's somewhere.
scene early in the
I
book.
got so
Yes,
scared at
Aha.
that
because
point. Like,
I didn't know how far you take it, and because you're an indie author, I was like, okay, this guy can take it anywhere. You know,
Yeah,
there's no editor breathing down his neck, so this
yeah,
can go anywhere. And you
yeah.
literally took me to the edge of the horrific.
Uh-huh.
just
Yeah.
to the edge of the
Yeah.
horrific, and then you pull
Same
back.
here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah.
And I remember I was, my blood pressure was, I was like, what is going on? And what I loved was, and then there were repercussions, and you handle the repercussions of something that big very,
Yeah.
very, very, I thought, very classy way, very intelligently, smartly. So can you talk us through a little bit of this sequence, that big fight? And
Okay. Well, I knew that when I wrote that a lot of people were going to find it disturbing. And
Mhm.
I've had a few people sort of nope out of the book at that point, but I knew that that's the price you have to pay for for other people to enjoy it as much as they do. In order to cook, you have to get close to the fire.
Yeah.
And so, there's this Marcus and Miranda are both sort of super predators of their respective
Mm.
spheres. And when you throw them in a cage together and you give them reasons to be in conflict, you know, you reach this point where they have to find a way to get along, a way to work together, a way to make peace, or someone is going to die. And that's sort of the natural progression of these characters who are very, very formidable in different spheres coming into conflict with each other. So there had to be this nadir moment, this darkest moment, this bottom
Mm.
of the pit where they both realize we've got to start doing something different.
Mm.
We cannot continue like this. And that has to be a two-sided realization. And those are some of the moments that we actually have in life before we make big changes. Anyone who's ever been addicted to drugs and gotten clean has that one story
Yep.
about that horrible thing that happened to them as the result of their own bad decisions. You know, People who have fixed their lives and overcome horrific circumstances that were imposed on them from outside, they all have that one story of, you know, this is how I decided to cut off contact with my abusive parents. You know, this is how I quit my dead end career and started pursuing my dreams. Sometimes we have to get really, really uncomfortable
Mm.
before we make a positive change. And this this story is the story of profound psychological transformations in all
Yep.
three of these characters. So they have to be really uncomfortable first. And the reader has to be really uncomfortable along with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes the payoff so much more satisfying when it
Yeah.
comes.
no, this was, I don't remember, like Kaiser. I'm a lot older than my co-host Kaiser, so I don't remember a lot of things about books that I've read. But that is one thing that I will always remember. That big fight, and you took me to the edge of despair. I was like, oh my God, what's Devon gonna do here? Like, I don't remember. I can't remember when the last time I was that unsure of where the story is
Yeah.
going.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
thank you for that. That was a
Yeah.
great, great,
Well,
great moment.
this series as a whole it's gonna have some rough moments, and it's gonna go to some dark places, and we are not done with that,
Mm-hmm.
because in order to see a light, you have to take it somewhere dark.
Yep.
And that, I think, is the sort of my attitude about where, a lot of older books from the early 20th centuries, they were idealistic and noble and bright and sort of pulpy and comic book superhero-ish, and that stuff is really fun. But eventually there was a counter movement where people said, okay, that's not realistic. That doesn't gel with my expectations of the real world, and so we're going to be darker and grittier and edgier. And eventually that kind of paradigm became its own worst enemy, because you had this sort of ridiculously despairing kind of grimdark stories where, as they say of certain fantasy authors, he could only write thugs and victims and none of his characters are heroes. um, and so you can go too far that way, but I think the sort of the role of these two paradigms is that you play them off in contrast to each other. And there's something Sam says near the end of Return of the King. And I think that he says it so beautifully that it really is Tolkien talking there. He says that sometimes in the best stories, the stories we really remember, things get so dark that you almost don't want to continue,
Yep.
because how could the ending be anything good?
Mm.
And this is what what Samwise is saying to Frodo as they're almost literally crawling through the last miles of the wasteland of Mordor, and they're at the end of their strength. And it's creating these moments in stories that make triumphs meaningful. And this is why characters have to suffer.
Mm.
This is why evil has to exist in your stories. This is why bad things have to happen. G.K. Chesterton once put it this way, another very wise author. He said, the point of fairy tales is not that dragons exist. Every child knows that dragons exist. The point of fairy tales is that dragons can be defeated.
Nice. And I'm glad. I think that's a fantastic segue to my next issue that I want to talk about. Basically, something bad happened to you, Devon, for which I discovered you. I'm talking about the SPSFC cancellation. So, I had no clue who Devon Eriksen was. I had no clue about Theft of Fire, blissfully
Uh-huh.
unaware of everything that's going on. But another person I need to thank is Elon Musk. I live 8,000 miles away from America, so I'm not closely associated to all the things he's doing. I have a long view. I love the guy, his philosophy. He's taking us to Mars. And Devon, my philosophy is that, all these governments full of self-righteous individuals and doing things for their own purposes, and all these petrodollar wars and jihadi wars and whatnot. If Elon blows up the earth because he was trying to take us to Mars, I'm all for it. If there's a robot uprising and they kill me because Elon did something, I'm cool with it. It'll be a good death for me. I was killed by robots. So I love Elon Musk and his
Mm.
philosophies from far away. I don't know him
Yeah,
well
yeah,
because I don't live in America.
yeah.
Very outsider's view.
Uh-huh.
So, and thanks to Elon Musk and X, just when I started following the indie author communities, JCM Byrne,
Uh-huh.
Shami Stovall, and some other
Uh-huh.
people, suddenly there was this SPSFC. I don't know what it was. So I figured out from how they were interacting that, okay, fine, it's a competition for sci-fi books. And this author called Devon Eriksen has been kicked out. I literally saw a post by SPSFC where they
Uh-huh.
said, we are kicking out Devon Eriksen because he did not live up to our code of conduct. And then people like JCM Byrne and others, they're like, okay, where's this code? Where is this code that he didn't live up to? And
They
then I
wrote the
remember
code
after,
2 days before.
exactly. And then after they're like, oh, this author is not in this thing. And then after 2 days, they publish the code, but they don't mention which part of the code you had apparently broken or whatever, didn't
Yeah,
abide by. But
yeah.
the good thing was, I'm like, okay, what is this guy doing? that's got so many people up in arms. I need to check his book out. So something bad happened to you. And the good was that I think a lot of people discovered you because
Uh,
of this
yeah,
controversy or whatever,
yeah.
however we want to call it. And by the way, I read some of the winners of this year's, basically the thing that you were kicked out of. I've read some
Uh-huh.
of the winners, and some of them are just not good.
Yeah.
So my faith on that competition is zero right now. But how was this experience for you? You know, suddenly and for people who don't know, I'll just say it shortly. So basically, Devon's wife Christine, who also acts as his manager, she had entered Devon's book as a surprise to Devon in case it wins something. That surprise, honey, your book is won. And he didn't know anything. Devon didn't know anything. And then one fine day, he wakes up and he sees that he has been kicked out from a competition he has no knowledge of ever being part of. So, Devon, why don't you talk us through what was going on at that
Okay.
time?
Yeah. Well, it was intended to be a bad thing happening to me. It was intended to be a bad thing happening to me by certain people. But overall, you know, positive experience. Best sales month ever. 10 out of 10 would get canceled again. Yeah, I should outrage more of these people. It was great. And, I was just sitting there laughing my ass off in the background because it's just so funny. It's like these people jump out at you and you are not in the contest. What contest? What are you talking about? And then it's just like this well, and eventually it comes out like, oh, the horrible things you wrote on Twitter. Well, you find them horrible. That's just my political opinion, and it's not really all that radical. you you guys have just gone crazy. You've become communists, and you tell yourselves that everybody else is evil for not being communists. It's like as your part of your effort to recycle the failed economic philosophies of the 19th century. So, in reality, e- there is this political divide in America where most politics, and I know nothing about politics in Bangladesh. I can only assume it's this way. Um, I would assume most politics in Bangladesh is like, we all agree that we kind of want to benefit Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is good and we want to take care of it, and we're all Bangladeshis and we have this common goal, and we disagree about how to achieve it. That's normal politics. That's what is best for our nation. What is the best way to achieve that which is good? In America, we've reached a political divide, and the stakes are so high because our nation is so wealthy and powerful, where we have these cultures that share a geographic land area, but we can no longer agree on the definitions of right and wrong. So if you have a contest with a lot of people in it who come from one side of this political divide, and then one of the authors who is doing very well in that contest because people like the book, they suddenly discover that he comes from the opposite side of that political divide. They say to themselves, they don't just say to themselves, as would be normal for politics, oh, this person is mistaken about how to move our country forward. They have a different definition than me of what's right and wrong. So they say, oh, this person is evil. What he is advocating is evil, and we must dissociate ourselves from him because this political gulf has widened to the point where it has become a moral conflict
Yeah.
between belief systems. And, I find all of this highly ridiculous because I'm, you know, 51 years old, going on 52. And so I come from a time in America where this gulf was not so wide. And I have this old-fashioned belief that your moral worth doesn't consist of what you believe. It consists of what you do. So you have all these people running around convinced that they're good people because they believe the correct things. And then you watch how their actions, you watch how they treat other people near them, and you say, "Oh, but this person is, you know, I have issues with this person's behavior." And that's the kind of people who are running around sort of trying to cancel people. It's like they see someone who disagrees with them and they want to hurt that person.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not complaining on my own behalf because their effort to hurt me actually helped me, and I wish they would please do it again. You are incompetent clowns and you only make me stronger. But that's how this all kind of shook out, is that we've had one of these political factions in America has been attacking people this way for some time. And so it's reached the point where when you get attacked like this, you get a lot of support from the people who are sick of this pattern. So that's kind of what happened. And a lot of it started with Elon Musk buying Twitter, because Twitter was controlled by people who were very interested in censoring opinions they didn't agree with, and were taking phone calls from a sitting administration, a sitting presidential administration, who was telling them who to kick off the platform. And of course, this is a clear violation of our Constitution, because we have the First Amendment to our Constitution says the government is not allowed to do this. It's not
Hmm.
allowed to shut people up. It's not allowed to tell them what they can say. So they used this private company as a sock puppet to do that which they were explicitly not allowed to do. And Elon Musk exposed this, which is why all the supporters of this faction are now so mad at him. I mean, I can understand where, the guy's mission in life is to go to Mars. I mean, he's not exactly a chill normal guy.
Hmm.
He's probably not easy to work for, and he's probably not easy to have as your best friend. He's probably gets kind of intense about things. But there's a difference between a nice guy and a great man, and we need to realize that. You know, we
Yeah, I
we
remember
need
that
to
line in
start
yeah.
evaluating people by their impact on the world, not whether they give us happy feelings in our tum tums when we talk to them or not. So I think what you're seeing with this sort of failed cancellation attempt is America starting to flip back as a reaction to this kind of censorship, to this kind of enforced niceness, to this kind of top-down political control, where people are saying, we've just had enough of this. We've had enough of this. We're sick of it. We're done with it. We don't want to be here. We don't want to hear anybody being called a Nazi, because you have no idea what a Nazi really is. And it's just, it has no meaning coming out of your mouth. It's just a magic spell that you utter in the hopes that you'll get what you want. So people were very sick of this sort of thing, and they were very supportive toward me because of that, and I am grateful. Thank you all.
Yeah, I'm grateful they kicked you out, because otherwise I would
Yeah,
never have discovered you,
yeah,
and you wouldn't have that magical month of amazing sales.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
I
was
did.
I was
I did better
yeah,
off being kicked out of the contest than I
yeah,
ever would have
absolutely.
done out of winning it.
So I was telling Kaiser, I was telling him that, Devon is very outspoken. He says a lot of things on Twitter, but at the same time, I feel like obviously I don't know everything about American politics. I know, again, from the outsider's viewpoint, so I don't have any judgments or opinions on what you say. I just follow the fact that you say a lot of forthright things, things that you believe, you put it out there. I was telling Kaiser basically, Devon is somebody, if I had started spouting everything that I believe, publicly, I would be similarly treated like Devon. So let's not worry about it. So the difference between you and me is I don't talk about it, you talk about it. That's one thing.
Yeah.
The other
Yeah.
thing is, I think that's a great thing you said about Elon Musk not being probably the easiest guy to hang out with, because there's a line in the Black Panther movie where his father says, T'Chaka says that, son, you can either be a great king or a great man. You can't be both.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really ancient philosophy that we're kind of forgetting. People who are doing massive things in their everyday life, we cannot
Mm.
expect them to behave like normal people. I
Yeah.
personally don't.
Well,
I never.
the when you have goals in mind, when you're doing something significant, when you're doing something that impacts people, when it reaches a lot of people, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it. And I get haters. I get hate mail. I get, reviews that are nasty and say personal things about me. And when you become a public figure on any level, you have to kind of expect that. And one of the challenges about being an author is that you have to be honest anyway, because this thing about great writing being honest, that's not just a saying. That's not just, oh, great writing is honest. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be honest? But really, all of the best works come from authors who are willing to expose sort of the underpinnings of their psyche in what they write. Yeah, every great novel on some level is saying, this is who I am. Not in the sense of look at me, but in the sense that what the stories you tell inevitably flow from who you are. You say that you spent a certain amount of time studying Stephen King's works, and I think that he's a very good example of that. Now, not everybody loves his writing. He's not my favorite in particular, but he's definitely had a large impact and a lot of people enjoyed it. And he writes some pretty freaky stuff, direct from the subconscious to the page, directly from the id to the pen. And by means of a conduit made of Bolivian marching powder. Um, but he's that kind of willingness to reveal yourself for who you are, and the courage to be able to do that, I think is a prerequisite for being a writer that has an impact on people. So, you know, like like Elon Musk says, you're gonna threaten me because of what I'm doing. Go fuck yourself. And you have to be willing to say that to people. You have to be willing to say, well, if you don't like what I'm doing, I recommend that you go look at something else, because not going to it's not going to change. I'm going to continue doing what I do because many people love it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Kaiser, do you have any more? We have passed the 1 hour mark. Do you have
Yeah.
any more questions?
I'm going to bring Devon back to Theft of Fire one more time,
Okay.
Yes.
because people who are watching, you guys might have some sort of misconception that it's not just about three people talking to each other. Theft of Fire has amazing outer space action, fighter, like spaceship fighting action, and most of all, my favorite, some really, really gunfight sequences. Now, I know,
Uh,
Devon, you're a gun enthusiast,
uh,
and the way you wrote those gunfight sequences absolutely
uh,
blew my mind away. So, how did your enthusiasm for guns play into those close quarter gunfight
uh,
sequences?
uh. Well, that chapter you're thinking of,
Yeah.
I believe it's the one called Agni Pariksha.
Yep. Yep.
Mm, that was
Trial by
probably one
fire.
of the most, yes, yes. That was probably one of the most difficult pieces of writing I have ever had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, it was a trial by fire for me
Yep.
because, first of all, you have to write an action sequence, which is complex in itself, and then you have these deeply imagined characters who you have to put in this situation, so you have to characterize them, and then you have to write real close quarters combat, real structure clearing tactics
Yeah.
for people who may not be very familiar with firearms in a way that is understandable to them. And then the whole thing is set in a spacecraft that's rotating on the end of a grapple cable.
Mm-hmm.
So the gravity's all wonky.
Mm-hmm.
It's got spin gravity that isn't in its usual direction. So managing all those layers required a lot of work. I think I spent maybe 2 or 3 weeks
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get that chapter right and throwing it away and starting again several times. But, obviously, this kind of tactical close quarters combat structure clearing is something I've had some training in,
Oh,
some
okay.
experience with. Um, so, but then I had to say, okay, how do I make this understandable to someone, to a reader who has never thought about these things before?
Mm-hmm.
And so I filtered that through the stream of Marcus's consciousness, where all the time he's in this fight, he's trying to solve problems, he's trying
Yeah.
to think his way through. And one of the things a lot of people don't know about structure combat is that it almost presents, as you're moving through this structure, as a series of sort of spatial riddles.
Yeah.
It's not like a movie action sequence
Mm-hmm.
where everybody's running around and shooting from the hip and diving through doorways and doing acrobatic rolls and coming up shooting to show how cool they are. That
Mm-hmm.
sort of flashy stuff works very well in a visual medium, but in actual practice, when you're going into a structure or you're moving through a structure and somebody's waiting at some place in that structure, and if you expose yourself they're going to shoot you, then it breaks down into this very slow, deliberate pace with this series of problems of, okay, how do I cross this space? How do I enter this space? How do I clear this space without exposing myself to more fire than I absolutely have to?
Yeah.
And I wanted to, the fact that I was writing in first person present tense was a wonderful opportunity for me to use his thought
Yeah.
process to
Mm-hmm.
show that. So I think it comes off very well in writing. It comes off very well in like an audiobook spoken word kind of thing. But obviously, if I were doing a film version of this, I would very much have to try to reimagine that scene
Yep.
because it doesn't do the things that play well in a film.
On
So
screen.
it
Yep.
was a mixture of the considerations of realism, the considerations of the story, and just the considerations of how do I express this in the medium. And I
And I
like to
really,
think that
yeah.
I taught a few people who have maybe absorbed some myths about firearms
Mm-hmm.
what they're really like.
But I absolutely loved how you made that action sequence very believable, because Marcus is not a gunman. Like, he does not have special training. But
Mhm.
without giving any spoilers, I absolutely loved it how you added that particular bit of cheat code that
Uh,
Marcus
yeah,
used to
yeah,
outwit his enemies
yeah,
who were more by number.
yeah.
So
Well,
I think
the
that was absolutely
the
genius.
tone I wanted to create is that yes, Marcus is a badass action hero type, and he has trained a great deal with firearms.
Yep.
He's competent, but this is not this Hollywood level of competence where he goes mowing down bad guys to show off how so the story can show off how cool he is,
Right.
because those make for very good visual spectacle. But if you take them too far in a story, yeah, and you can work them really well. But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to see that done really well, look at the fiction of Larry Correia. He does some excellent
Okay.
badass work in his Monster Hunter series. But if you take that too far, and some
Mm-hmm.
writers do take that too far, you can you can lessen the sense of threat, and that removes the tension. So I wanted to create this impression of this very competent character who is still in a lot of danger, because this is a very dangerous situation in
Mm-hmm.
reality. When you're going into a structure where somebody's waiting for you, you typically want to bring at least 4 times as many guys, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to have all the advantages you can, and even then it's still very hazardous. It's not something you want to do unless you have no choice.
Speaking
The
of
real way
cool,
that you clear a structure is you
yeah.
you get on the radio, and your friend in the in the F-18 Hornet drops a 500-pound JDAM on the building and clears it that way. So you really don't want to be getting in there unless you have to. But I wanted to create this sense of a highly competent hero navigating a real and serious hazard
Yep.
that could easily get him killed.
But speaking of cool action sequences on screen, I have two questions. Number
Yeah.
one is, do you want Theft of Fire to be a movie or a TV show? If we can
Ah,
have something like that in the future.
okay. Well, I do have some thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that first of all, it would kind of want to be a mini series,
Yeah,
one
I agree.
season for each book,
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of goes into depth, and I don't think you could cram that into a movie format.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you would want to computer animate it,
Mm-hmm.
because the characters only one of the characters is precisely human,
Yep.
and there's a lot of visual differences there, and a lot of it occurs in zero or low gravity,
Okay.
which is very difficult to film in live action. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you would go. Now, there would be some real challenges, because so much of the book is tied up with that first person internal monologue based perspective.
Yep.
You would have to do a considerable amount of reinterpretation, because that's not really available to you when you're doing film.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't support that kind of perspective. But I think that every story is defined by who the characters are and what they want, what they do about that, what happens as a result, and their relationship to each other. So if you keep those things the same for a screen interpretation, you can rewrite all the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
You can do different things, and it'll still be the same story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that could be made to work with a very experienced script writer, and that I would work very closely with. But if that is ever going to happen, I think it would not happen through the standard sort of Hollywood process, because very early on, I was like, okay, well, I'm nobody in particular now, but the hope is that I may be a famous guy one day. So I have to think about this.
Yep.
I've seen what Amazon did to Tolkien.
Uh,
I've seen what Amazon did to Robert Jordan. I've seen what Netflix did to Cowboy Bebop. I don't trust Hollywood.
Okay.
I don't trust them. So I made a promise early on, I don't sell rights. I don't sell rights. If there's going to be a a move to a different medium, I'm going to gather funds and I'm going to do it myself. And that's what I did with the audiobook. I did a Kickstarter for a full cast audiobook, raised $42,000.
Wow.
We did we did a very top shelf production on that, and I think people will enjoy it. And that's a step maybe toward an animated series. So I think that if it ever comes to the screen, it will be because I was able to raise the right amount of funds and put the right people together to actually do that.
Mhm.
And, you know, right now, I'm a minor independent author, and this is a pipe dream. But if you look at what's happening within film, it may not be unrealistic forever.
Yep.
Did either of you see Godzilla minus one?
Yep.
it's brilliant.
Brilliant film.
Brilliant.
You know, not just a stompy monster movie, but a real deep story that pulls you in, which just happens to be about a big stompy monster. And what was so telling for me was, do either of you happen to know what the production budget on that film was?
$50 million.
Ah, no, that's the total budget, including marketing. I'm
Okay.
talking about the production budget.
I think it's $15 million, I think.
Ah, 15. Yes, 16 is what I heard.
16. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and that was easily visually as good as a story. It was better, but visually it was as good as any Hollywood blockbuster costing 300, 400, $500 million. So we always knew Hollywood was wasteful. We never knew how wasteful. So at this point, it's like the technology has moved on. We know how to do this more cheaply, and we're getting better at this all the time. And just as the medium of books is opening up with self-publishing, just as the medium of audiobooks is opening up, I think that you will start to see smaller independent outfits, maybe in the next 5 years, bringing their stories to the screen, not just in this sort of cheesy, low budget way that we used to see, but as really, really high quality animated projects. I think we'll start to see that in the near future. And I hope someday to be able to bring some of my work into that area.
Now,
Fantastic.
to be respectful of your timing, Devon, this is going to be my last question,
Okay.
and probably the question that I will give the most importance to. The next book, Box of Trouble.
Uh-huh.
When are we getting it?
Well, we did have an 8 month battle with cancer.
Yep.
And that really sort of derailed the writing. So Box of Trouble is now a little bit late,
Hmm.
and I'm fully aware of that. And I don't want to behave like certain other writers and say, "Oh, it's coming next year, it's coming next year," and it's 13 years and nothing happens. And we all know who we're talking about here. Um, and I think one of the important things is to be honest with readers and not lie to them, and to be as transparent as possible. So I was stalled for quite some time because I had bigger things to deal with, and that's unfortunate. I apologize for that. I just can't
Yeah.
write in hospitals. They
Yep.
blank your mind. They do. But progress is once again happening. I'm I have about a 134,000 word count now, and that's getting pretty close to the size of the actual volume of the first one. Now there's a lot of sort of reshuffling and rewriting and removing the scenes that are detailed summaries to replace that scene with literal text. But progress is once again being made. So at worst it will happen sometime this year. I am very confident of that. i
S-
I hope it will be this summer. That is maybe a stretch, but at worst it will be sometime this year.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the next book.
Well, I can give you another piece of good news is that often um authors sort of sophomore efforts, their second novel, will hit a bit of a slump because it's harder to write when you're getting used to being a public figure. It's
Yep.
There's a lot of additional challenges there, and you have deadlines and publishers and this kind of thing. So often there's a slump there, but I am taking my time to make this one right.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of things from Theft of Fire. I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot of things from the feedback from Theft of Fire. And so while I am not satisfied with my rate of progress, I'm embarrassed that it's taken this long. I apologize for that. I feel bad about it. But when I see the parts that I've written down, when I get them hammered out, I think that it will. I think I've become a better writer, and I think that it will be a significant improvement of the first one.
No,
Devin,
thank you so much.
nothing's more important than family. So love and
Yep.
prayers to your family member
Thank you,
who
thank
is,
you.
I hope she's getting better.
Yeah, she
And this
is.
is the perfect
She is. We
opportunity.
we've reached the point of no visible evidence of cancer on scans,
That's
Oh, good.
fantastic.
so
So this
we're
gives
good.
me the perfect segue to give a
Uh,
shout out to Christine and also bring
uh,
out this amazing photo. I couldn't stop laughing. I just love
uh,
this. I think these are the two ladies in your life,
yes,
and I think the left one is Christine.
yes, and the right one is
So
Sarah. Yeah.
right one is Sarah, left is. So I just found this hilarious and very cute. So is there a story behind this, or what's going on here?
Oh, we were out having a shooting day at somebody's private range in Middle Tennessee, which is out behind his house because we are country folk here. There are big swaths of open land, and we like our guns, and we go out and shoot at long distance. And as it turned out, which we didn't know until we got there, was one of the people there is a professional photographer
Mm.
who does a lot of portraiture stuff, and he's like, "Can we do a photo shoot?" I'm like, um, yes, please. So he got a whole bunch of photos of all of us of very professional quality, and we've been using those in our publicity, and that's worked out very well for us. So that was very kind of him to do that.
So
Sorry.
shout out to Christine. Thank you so much. If she hadn't reached out to me, I would never get the
Yep.
courage to reach out to you guys.
Mm.
Uh, um, 1 second.
Yeah,
Let me bring
well,
this
I
back.
love doing these podcast appearances. This is great fun for me. I love to talk about this stuff. So
No, I literally,
I don't
I
want
got
people
the.
to think that I'm only interested in them if they have a big audience. I'm interested in anybody who has interesting questions.
Now, thank God, because I was extremely. I reached out to JCM
Uh,
Byrne the first time because there's a connection with him and my country. He's married to somebody
uh,
from my country,
uh,
and he makes it public. So
uh,
I was like, okay, so he knows he's married to somebody from a country, so I'm not a complete alien to him. So
Uh-huh.
I reached out tentatively to him, and he was fantastic. He came on with a great
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh.
And then I approached Shamey, literally telling her, hey, we had JCM Byrne on our show, so would you please come?
Uh-huh.
And she was a sweetheart.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, I
I
watched
was
your
like,
show. Yeah.
and you're like, okay, this guy looks very serious, so I need to really think about approaching him. I was scared. I was
Uh-huh.
scared to approach you. So it's
No,
out there.
you shouldn't be.
And
You
then,
shouldn't be.
and then
I
your
think
wife very, very
yeah.
kindly she reached out, and I'm like, wow, this is like amazing. So thank you, Christine. Thank you, Christine,
Yep.
for reaching
Yeah.
out and
Yeah,
making
no,
this possible. And thank you,
she's
Devon.
great. And I watched some of your previous shows to prepare for this. And I think you've done an excellent job with it. I mean, I think that one of the things that I notice is that whenever you have someone on, you ask really insightful questions that kind of gives them a chance to play to their strengths and to talk about the things that are most interesting about what they're doing. So I think you're really onto something here. And I very
Thank you
much
so
approve
much.
of the show.
Devon, just one last question, and
Uh-huh.
then we'll let you go. This is something that's very dear to my heart. I just told you I love Elon Musk and I love everything he's
Uh-huh.
doing.
Yeah.
So one thing he's involved in is AI, and I'm
Uh-huh.
in advertising by profession. So we are
Yeah.
starting to use a lot of AI in our work. I use it personally when I'm talking about books. I write something rough that I dump it on ChatGPT. I'm like, polish this up for me. They do it instantly. So I'm a big believer in AI as a tool to help
Uh-huh.
me be creative or
Yeah.
tool to help me be productive. But of
Yeah.
course, as we know, there's a big divide. Like there are a lot of people anti AI. So Devin,
Mm.
my point is about my question to you is I'm reading a lot of indie books now and I'm loving them, but there are a few typos here and there, some spelling mistakes. And I know like there's a feeling I get from indie authors. They're like, oh, just get over it, don't worry about it. But when I'm
Hmm.
reading as a reader, but when I'm a reader, it's like I suddenly hit a wall. When I hit a
It's
typo, I
jarring.
hit a wall. It's
Yeah.
very, very jarring. So
Yeah.
how do you see for especially for indie authors in the future or in the near future, like you finish drafting, writing your entire story, you put it in Chat GPT, and you're like, or any AI, and you're like, you know what? Take away all my spelling and grammar mistakes. So do you
Mhm.
think these kinds of things will really help indie authors in the future, or I don't know, where do you stand on AI?
Well, I think that first of all, I think that a lot of the fears of AI in its current state is unjustified. I think that people who are afraid of being replaced, if you have any talent, you won't be, because AI can do certain things very well that doesn't require a lot of higher level thought, but it's not really very good at the higher consciousness functions. And so if you bring those to the party as an author or as an artist or as a voice actor or anything like that, then you're not really going to suffer too much. It's going to be more of a tool than a threat to you. But I think that in order to use AI effectively, you have to understand its capabilities and limitations. It's very good at paying a lot more attention than you are, and it's very good at doing rote tasks quickly that would take you a long time. So one of the examples you used was proofreading. You know, that's a that's a very good example. Um, we had some real problems with the proofreading for Theft of Fire. We hired somebody who represented herself as a professional proofreader, and she was not only 2 weeks late in getting back with the completed version, but she didn't do the entire job. She sent us back a manuscript with things that she thought were errors highlighted, like with a yellow highlighter font, but without any corrections. So we couldn't just incorporate these. We had to go through and so, and this left us with so little time before our publication date that we didn't have time to hire another one. We literally had to go all through three of us just reading it again and again and again, trying to spot all of the typos and errors we could. And we still let a fair amount of stuff slip through, which we've been gradually fixing as it comes up. So we're actually to a state of pretty good now, but that was a particular Achilles, excuse me, heel for us in not being traditionally published. So, definitely I will be employing AI tools as part of a multi-layered proofreading strategy the next time around. Other things I use AI for is research. It's very good at looking stuff up. It's not very smart, but it can find things on the web. So when I need to design a comprehensive strategy for terraforming Mars, or when I need to design a gas mining station orbiting Neptune, or when I need to design a method of docking with a space station that doesn't have a central hub, I can't ask it to solve those problems for me
Mm.
because it doesn't understand that kind of context. But I can ask it, can you fact check this idea for some of the physics? And it'll say, okay, this works. It'll misinterpret this, and then I have to explain it. But it's a useful sort of partnering tool for doing that kind of research. Another thing that AI is very good for is being dumb. It's good at being dumb. And that's not just a joke. It's when you when you work through something, you have to make sure it's understandable to somebody who isn't you. And so when you present something like I write a scene, okay, I'm going to put this into an AI tool, and then I'm going to ask it some questions. I'm going to ask it some reading comprehension questions. You know, how does this character feel about this? You know, why did this character do this?
Mm.
How does this science fiction technology work? And if this sort of dumb AI large language model can spit back an answer that is relatively on point, then I know that I've made something pretty comprehensible.
Mm.
If it gets confused, then maybe some of the readers out there will get confused as well. So it's very good for being this kind of explain it to the teddy bear kind of troubleshooting or you know
Idiot proofing.
yeah, idiot proofing tool. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I think that's a wonderful way of looking at AI. That's
Yeah.
exactly how I look at it. Good to know. Um, do you have 10 more minutes? Then we try to answer
Yes.
some
Yes.
comments or
Yes.
questions. Thank you so much. Let me just see what the people have said. So, someone, Nebulous Neil is here. First comment. Thank you so much. Rakib is here. Yeah, yeah, to you as well. And of course, JCM Byrne. Thank you so much, JCM Byrne. Second comment. Um, Rorona Zoro says, started reading the book after Shakib Bhai, that's me, recommended it weeks ago. Haven't finished it yet. Took me too long to finish part one. For me, the second half of part two is where it became interesting for me.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Books will hit people differently.
yeah,
Some people are motivated by the character stuff. Some people are motivated by the action.
makes sense. He continues, your father's job explains why the first part is full with so much technical jargon. I don't remember so much technical jargon, so I don't know
Me
what he's talking
neither.
about.
Me
Well,
neither.
there's different thresholds of that. Everybody experiences that which is less familiar to them as technical jargon, and
Right. Mm.
everyone writes we all write to an audience. It's even if you're writing a contemporary novel, you're making assumptions about your audience. You assume they know
Yeah.
what an automobile is. You know,
Right.
if you were to get a Kalahari Bushman from the 16th century and translate the Great Gatsby into his language, he wouldn't know what was going on because none of these constructs are familiar to him. So I have to think about my audience and strike a balance between not explaining that which is familiar to them because I'm going to annoy them, and not assuming they know too much because I'm going to confuse them. So even if you hit that zone where you satisfy most of the audience, there's going to be some people who are maybe less familiar with the science fiction tropes and they're going to be a little bit confused. And some people who are, maybe they've got a degree in physics and they're, they're going to be going, get on with it.
Oh,
I don't need to know that, forward takes you out and out takes
Yep.
you back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know orbital mechanics. Well, most of my readers don't. Sorry.
okay. We have Jeet Saha. Jeet is saying, what are some of the books which kind of inspired Devon Eriksen? So, Devon, if you could just talk about one inspirational book.
Uh everything Heinlein ever wrote. Ringworld by Larry Niven. A lot of the science fiction by Walter John Williams. I drew some concepts from William Gibson's Neuromancer. That's just a few.
Okay.
Neuromancer I started, but it didn't vibe with me, so I didn't finish it.
Neuromancer is a little more literary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit character driven, and
Mm-hmm.
his point of view character is maybe a little bit detached, emotionally detached, and that's the
Yeah.
kind of character he's trying to create. But it can create a certain distance, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make the story move quite as fast as some
Yeah.
people like. So I would call Neuromancer sort of it's one of those things. It's like coffee, either you like it or you don't.
Christine says, excited you're all here and delighted for what may be Devon's geographically farthest away interview yet.
Yeah, I
Yep,
have no time. I have no idea what time of day it is over
it's 12:20 in the morning,
there.
which is fine. I sleep at 4. It's fine.
Okay.
Uh, Lord Spay is here. It's a great hearing him. Thank you so much, Lord Spay. Knox Film Cafe is here. Loving the show. Thank you so much. Christine continues, haha, finishing Theft of Fire at 3 a.m. is extremely common. Kaiser, I think that's to you.
Yep.
It's very hazardous to people's sleep. Yeah, I couldn't put it down. I could not put that book down before I finished it.
Same here.
Um,
Same here.
Knox continues, interesting take. Actually, science fiction is fantasy. I think that's something, it's a very interesting point you made. I'd never thought about it particularly that way, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
100% makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's not something I can say, oh, this is a fact, because really
Mm.
genres are for readers and librarians, not for
Mm-hmm.
authors. You're an author, you just write a book and it
Yeah,
is whatever it is. And
Mm.
then it's once you have a manuscript and it goes out and it gets published, and then it gets in the hands of like someone who owns a bookstore, someone who's got a library, or you're putting it on Amazon and you have to decide where to shelve this thing. So
right.
that's really what genres are. But I think it makes a lot of sense to think of science fiction as fantasy.
I agree. Um, I love seeing your enthusiasm for Devon's book. We have to be. Everybody we bring here, we're 100% enthusiastic and we love their books. And Devon, I've already told you,
Yeah.
I've written about it in X. It's an instant classic cipher for me. It's insane.
Thank you.
The book is insane. Zoro continues. I really liked how Marcus and Miranda argues and fight against each other. They don't give a shit. It feels more realistic compared to many other books. Exactly what I was talking about, Devon.
Yeah.
Xerex1990, a long-time viewer, is here. Thank you so much for joining. He continues. Cradle. Acha, he's on the Cradle series, the book Uncrowned. Great, fantastic. Keep reading. My good buddy Atish Sumar Rahman is here. This is absolutely great to see. I'm not a reader, but learned a lot about creativity, processes, and depth. Very inspiring. Thanks
If
so much,
you're not a
Atish.
reader, you haven't found the right book yet.
Mm, mm.
Good one. Good call. Good call, Devon. Atish continues.
Somebody said that recently. I thought it was very wise.
Atish continues. This is great to see. Acha, I think it's the concept of delivering on a promise and how to do that via a book was massively insightful. Great work. Nice, nice, nice. Zoro continues major oopsies by Hollywood. Yeah. I also didn't like, you didn't mention this, but Apple TV did Foundation. I watched season one and I was
Oh.
horrified. It's beautiful to look
Yeah,
at.
I think the reason I didn't mention it was that was a traumatic memory that I blotted from
Yeah.
my mind. That
It's really
series
bad.
had just had nothing to do with the books, and
It's really bad.
there was just no creativity because the Foundation series, the central Asimov's Foundation series, is basically a long series of conversations between people. That's almost all the book is, but Asimov writes dialogue so well that you don't care. And
That's
it
why
just
that's why your
they
book was
needed
an
better
instant
script
classic.
writers to convey that.
I have no clue what they did, why they did with this
Yeah.
series. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So Xerex asks a nice question. Devin, you don't trust Hollywood? Fine. What about Japan, anime, those people?
I think that the anime stuff that is coming out of Japan represents a very, very deep pool of talent and creativity. You know, obviously there's some pulp stuff, and but there is a lot of just brilliance. And sometimes it doesn't always scan well for Western viewers because the Japanese have and expect a slightly different set of tropes. And there are some things from Japanese animation that scan very well, like having multiple main protagonists. Like
Mm,
there's no one main protagonist. This is a story about a group of people. And I took that and used that in Theft of Fire, where, no one person is the main character. There's one point of view character, but all three are the main character. And I very deliberately imitated that from Japanese animation. But there are some other things from Japanese animation that don't scan as well for the West, and this would be things like Japanese audiences are very, very tolerant of long-winded exposition. So often Japanese anime will just stop and turn to the camera and explain something. And all of the Western viewers are like, oh, this again. But Japanese people don't mind that. So I think that there's a lot we can pull from Japan, both in terms of stories and technically. There's a lot we can learn from them, and I think that's very valuable. But stories kind of sometimes require a little bit of transliteration. So if he's asking, you know, what if a Japanese company wanted to do an anime of it? It would have to be like, well, are you targeting a Japanese or an American audience?
mm.
Because you would have to tell the story in two slightly different ways. And I would be fine with either one, but you want to know what you're getting into.
Right.
But I
Christine
have
has
I
some.
have the
Yeah,
utmost respect for the anime industry as a whole. I think they are really killing it.
they are. They are. In fact, our my co-host Kaiser has his own podcast, which is called Anime Quest. So we're big fans of anime here. Um, so Christine is full of praise. Yes, fantastic show. Great interview questions. Thank you so much,
I
Christine.
think I think she
Much
was
appreciated.
commenting this when I was saying that
Yeah.
you guys ask very good interview questions.
Thank you so much. Christine continues. Also, I'm replying to things as I hear them in the living room. I think the show here has a already there's a delay in the actual streams. Yeah. Sorry if my comments aren't matching up real time. No problem, Christine. No
Well, that's
problem.
well, we visited them all at the end anyway, so it's
Yeah.
all out of sequence regardless.
So Zoro is the last comment here today. This has to be my favorite episode of Book Dawn so far. Devon was very interesting and comforting to listen to. Yeah, you have a radio voice, Devon. I have to give it to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Hopefully he
absolutely.
can make time to come back on the show in the future. Absolutely. That's
Absolutely.
our
Yeah, I would love to.
we would love
I've
that.
had fun.
So, Devon, before we go, once again, this is Theft of Fire. For me, it's an instant sci fi classic. I cannot recommend this book enough. Where do you get it? You get it right here. You can get it in Amazon if you're not in Bangladesh. If you're in Bangladesh, you can get it from www.devoneriksen.com. The link is also in the description section of YouTube or and probably Facebook. So, get this book. This is insane. I cannot hype this book enough. Devon, thank you so much for being with us today. It
No,
was an
thank you.
absolute pleasure to have you with us. It's an honor to have you with us, and hopefully, we'll be back here soon with
Yes,
Box
absolutely.
of Troubles when it comes out.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Working
Thank
hard
you.
Thank
on
you.
it.
Thank you.
So, everybody who joined us, thank you so much for your live views. We got tremendous live viewership thanks to Devon, like 2,000 people watching simultaneously, which is
Wow.
unheard of for me for this show. So, thank you, Devon. Thank you, everybody watching live. We will see you next Tuesday again. Good night.